And hi, everyone. Welcome. You're about to see a great presentation by Stacy, Dahl, and Ann Winkus about the March Point Heronry. That story actually started 29 years ago when the Land Trust was only 2 years old, and before we had any staff even. We were young and did not have much experience yet, when out of the blue, a quiet man, Mr. Bud Kenny, contacted us. He owned and was in the process of selling the cement plant and gravel pit below the Heronry. Plus, he owned the 2.5 acres of forested land on the hill where the Heronry was. I never knew if it was Bud or his wife Vera or both who wanted to protect the herons. He didn't say much about the herons, but he seemed to like them. We didn't have an office, so I met Mr. Kenny several times in a restaurant. He had the 2.5 acres surveyed, and the donation to the Land Trust went pretty smoothly. Our first property that we actually owned, that was an exciting moment. Even though the area was small, we knew that it was an important parcel for the herons. And this became a great example of planting a seed. Once we have one property protected, we always look for opportunities with adjacent lands. And with some lucky circumstances and persistent good work by staff and volunteers, we have been able to add another 13 acres of protected property. That gives the herons a lot of room to expand. Who would have guessed when the Land Trust was first started 31 years later, we would be learning so much more about the herons and celebrating their continued success on this site. Thanks to all of you for your generous support. Please welcome Stacy and Ann.
Thanks, Keith. So, as the volunteer and education programs coordinator for the Trust, one of my roles is to oversee Land Trust community science work. So before Ann gives us a peek into the Heronry, I'd like to give you some background on March Point and the community science work that we do. Skagit Land Trust has been conserving land since 1992, and as Keith mentioned, one of the first trust acquisitions was a donation of land from Bud and Vera Kinney, and that was to protect this heron colony who'd been there since at least the 1950s. So this aerial view gives you an idea of where the Heronry is, nestled between Highway 20 and Padilla Bay and hemmed in by industry and development. Through subsequent acquisitions, as Keith mentioned, the trust now protects nearly 11 acres, and then T. Bailey, our neighbor to the northwest, protects an additional 5 acres through a conservation easement. The March Point is the largest nesting site of the great blue heron along the west coast, and as such, it's the primary breeding center for the Salish Sea and contributes significantly to the genetic diversity of the region. That, along with the tendency of the Salish Sea heron to nest in mega colonies such as March Point, make these colonies especially vulnerable to human disturbance. And increased human impact has caused other large colonies to abandon entirely and may have played a role in the abandonment of the Samish Island colony in 2017. But despite its compact size, March Point offers ideal heronry habitat with trees tall enough to support nests 50 feet in the sky and proximity to abundant food in the eelgrass beds in Padilla Bay. But because suitable habitat for nesting has diminished in the Puget Sound area, the importance of conserving March Point can't be overstated. And not only is it important to conserve March Point, but it is essential to monitor the colony to watch for problems. So currently, there are 3 trust-based community science projects associated with March Point. This work couldn't be done without dedicated volunteers and the many hours they contribute. During the active tree survey, SLT staff and volunteers walk through the property, looking below the nest trees for whitewash, discarded eggshells, feathers, and bird carcasses. We do this immediately after the heron disperse from the colony because the evidence is still fresh and not hidden by fallen leaves or washed away by winter rains. Nests can persist over the years, even if they're not used. So knowing which trees were used combined with data from the nest count gives a more complete picture of how many nests were actually occupied. And then after leaves have fallen from the trees, volunteers returned to count the number of nests in the Heronry during another one-day survey. The trust provides data to WDFW, and this data, along with Fish and Wildlife's management recommendations for great blue heron, helps guide the planning departments of Skagit County and the city of Anacortes when making development decisions near the Heronry. With the ground-based nesting observation project, monitors observe from outside the colony during nesting season. And although they're watching from a distance, they have a great overall view of the Heronry and can see heron reaction to disturbance, whether it's predator, as in this case, bald eagle, or human caused. These volunteers also have experience identifying heron sounds, which helps confirm the breeding phase, even if they're unable to see into the nests. Having a team on the ground has also helped identify potential disturbance, such as roadwork or off-gassing from local industry. But it's also important to assess the health of the colony by looking at the overall productivity of the heron. Through camera observations, we can see how many eggs were laid, how many chicks survived through fledging. We can also establish occupancy and breeding timelines and develop a baseline to evaluate any unusual behaviors or the impact of disruptive activity. Although in the past, the trust has had a single camera at March Point, in 2022, 3 state-of-the-art cameras were installed. These cameras can be operated from a volunteer's home computer, and having these 3 cameras gives the trust a look into hundreds of nests and will provide us a more accurate sense of what is going on in the Heronry. We're ramping up to the 2023 observation season. Herons have yet to return to the colony, although we are seeing more and more numbers near the Swinomish Casino, which is where we often see the staging behavior. When they do return, you'll have a chance to watch what's going on through the Trust YouTube channel. And next, I'm really happy to present Ann Winkus, who is both a part of the ground observation team and the North Camera observation team, who will give us a more in-depth look at her experiences.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thanks, Ann.
First, a huge thanks to all of you for being part of Skagit Land Trust and helping protect special places like the March Point Heronry. The wildlife cameras have opened up a whole new world for us, giving us a bird's eye view of some behaviors we'd only read about and some we knew nothing about. Crowded in there, aren't they? Great blue herons are colonial nesters, positioning their nests close to one another, either apartment style, one above the other, as you can see on the right and in the center, or horizontally placed, as you can see on the left. About a week or 2 before the March Point herons enter the Heronry to begin breeding and nesting, they gather outside the Heronry in large numbers in a behavior called staging. Not all heron colonies stage, but March Point herons have done so for many years, sometimes on the Dredgeville Islands in the Swinomish Channel, sometimes on the railroad track across from the Heronry, as you see here. Males enter the Heronry first, choosing nests, reinforcing old nests, sometimes building new ones, and await the females. This is a male heron in full advertising display, with his lower neck scapular and back feathers erect, his bill a bright orange, announcing, "This is my nest." Nest shapes and sizes vary a lot. Some are huge, like this one. Others are small and shallow, like this one. But all of them seem to work well for rearing heron young. One pair I watched on the north camera successfully raised 3 hatchlings through to fledglings from a small, shallow nest. The fledglings made it, but the nest didn't last the season. Here they are, young enough for the whole family to still fit on the nest. As they grew larger, the space grew smaller. 10 days later, sleeping huddled together, the young fill the nest. 2 weeks after that, the nest is beginning to fall apart. By the time these three become fledglings, they will be almost as large as their parents, nearly 4 feet tall with 6-foot wingspans. See if you can find the nest in this photo taken 2 weeks before they fledged. It's pretty much gone, destroyed by growing teenagers fighting for food, flapping their wings, hopping about on nearby branches. Close up, you can see that the nest's basic structure is made from sticks that are 9 to 12 inches long, about the thickness of a pencil. Herons add sticks to their nests throughout the season, primarily when eggs are laid and again when the chicks hatch. As you have seen, raising chicks is hard on nests. This adult is carefully placing a stick following the hatching of its first chick. Many of the March Point herons place an insulating ring of fir twigs around their nest, around their eggs. This incubating heron added fir and alder to its nest when temperatures hovered around 48. After losing its first clutch, this heron added more insulating twigs to this, its second clutch. Usually, whether constructing nests or reinforcing nests, it's the male who brings the nesting material and the female who positions it. Watch this pair reinforce their nest after the chicks have hatched. He arrives with a stick. He offers it. She grasps it and places it where she wants it. The business of selecting mates takes place over a week or two. Herons form monogamous bonds just for the nesting season. With the cameras, we were able to see that courtship rituals continue even after the female has begun to lay eggs. Here's a pair just hanging out with their single egg. Here they are, 41 seconds later, wing preening simultaneously. 10 minutes later, a courtship ritual has begun. Low neck, scapular, back, and head feathers are erect. Bills are bright orange. One rapidly chatters its bill at the other. The other chatters back. 20 seconds later, they are bill dueling. The female grabs the male's bill and holds on until he gives in and allows her to remain in his nest. Eggs are laid asynchronously over about a week. One egg, then a day or two later another, until typically 3 to 5 eggs have been laid. Heron parents take turns incubating eggs. While one parent incubates, its mate may be nearby preening, as here, sleeping, watching, or off foraging. Herons rarely leave their eggs unattended. Incubation shifts are long, lasting 10 hours or more. During its shift, the incubating parent stands up about once an hour, shakes and fluffs out its feathers, turns around, and sits back down. Every 2 hours, it carefully tends the eggs. Watch this heron tending 5 eggs. Here, moving the eggs. Done with one, on to the next. Moving another. Just about done. And now back to incubating. As you've just seen, herons are remarkably handy with their long bills. But thanks to the cameras, I've learned they are equally handy with their feet. Heron toes are long and flexible. As herons walk, they spread their toes out wide, allowing them to walk easily on mud without sinking and through eelgrass without getting tangled up. Their pectinated toenails, which you can see here, allow them to scratch their skin and their feathers. Their flexible toes grip branches tightly. I now know they also use their feet to gently shimmy eggs into position. Look at this heron's left foot. And though I wasn't able to catch it in a photo sequence, I watched as they would slide a foot beneath a hatchling and lift it into place before settling down to brood. Look at this parent's left foot beneath the hatchling, and you can picture that lift happening. Looking at the enormity of this foot relative to the eggs and the hatchlings, I am amazed at how nimble and gentle they are. As the eggs are laid asynchronously, they are hatched asynchronously. It takes a chick about 2 days to become entirely free of the shell. This is the first chick hatched last year in North Nest 62. It's several days before all the eggs hatch. Here's the next hatchling in that same nest 4 days later. You can see the pip hole in the shell behind. New hatchlings are very small, weighing about 2 ounces with just a bit of fluffy down. The first hatched chicks have a head start on the later hatched, as they're larger, and you can see the difference between the sizes of these two. They have a clear advantage in the fight for food. The last chicks to hatch often die. If they do survive, they grow more slowly and remain in the nest longer before fledging. Here, in these 2 chicks, you can see the size difference persists even as they age. In the first 3 weeks of life, heron chicks can't be left on their own. They are unable to maintain their body temperature, and their small size makes them vulnerable to predators. Heron parents continue to take turns staying with the chicks. Here is a sequence I captured of 1-week-old chicks being carefully adjusted into position by their brooding parent. First, using its left leg. Now, with its right. Now, with its bill. Just about right, but needs yet 1 more stick. And now back to brooding. While brooding, one parent remains at the nest to provide warmth and guard the chicks. The other may be out foraging or may be standing by, watching or preening. Here are parents of 4-day-old chicks, both at the nest, the brooding adult standing above the chicks as if alarmed, its mate alerting to a threat. Now the brooding parent screams, shielding the chicks with its wings. 10 seconds later, both adults are settling down. 15 minutes later, all is back to normal. Guarding chicks is tiring. Here, a dozing parent with its bundle of 2-week-old sleeping chicks. By around 3 weeks of age, one parent can't provide enough food. The chicks can now maintain their own body temperature and are large enough to be safe, or at least safer from predators. So the adults leave the chicks unattended as they search for food. Here are 1-month-olds waiting for their parents' return. And here's how they behave when the parent does come back. Feed me, feed me. Heron chicks' caloric demands are huge. They grow from about 2 ounces to almost 5 pounds in 2 months. Each adult requires the same number of calories for its own daily needs as does each chick. Most heron parents are caring for 2 to 3 chicks. That means the adults are having to catch a whole lot of small fish, following the tides, sometimes flying as far as Samish Bay. Thanks to the cameras, we've learned lots about how heron young eat. This is a 7-day-old with its mouth wide open, yelling for food. That pinkish glob is part of the tongue. Hatchlings begin to eat food the parents have regurgitated into the nest soon after hatching. Watch the chick whose wide open mouth you just saw getting fed at 8 days of age. It initiates the feeding, reaching for the parent's bill, holds onto the bill as the parent lowers its head. You can see the bulge of fish in the adult's throat pouch. Lets go of the bill and positions its beak at the tip of the parent's bill, ready to eat when the food comes. The parent regurgitates. You can see a morsel of fish at the end of the parent's open bill. Success. The chick has the fish. Levi Shelton's captured this remarkable sequence of a chick around 5 days old struggling to swallow a fish that seems decidedly too large for it. Here's the parent doing we don't know what, trying to pull it out, reposition it, stuff it in. Now the chick still struggling, and here comes another fish. As they grow, the young herons swallow as much as they can right from the mouth of the parent. Watch this 1-month-old. Beak open expectantly, grabs the parent's bill, hangs on crosswise. Now the parent feeds directly into the mouth of the 1-month-old. Not yet done. Now the second parent tries to stuff more in. And the first lends a hand, or I should say bill. A couple of minutes later, the 1-month-old is going after bits of dropped food. Adults continue to feed their young until they fledge at 2 months of age. The parents almost seem to hesitate before feeding their rapidly growing, aggressive, hungry adolescents. Watching them, I think you'll understand why. Here's what happens when the parent arrives back at the nest filled with teenagers. The adolescent, almost as large as the parent, grabs the parent's bill and pulls its head into the nest. The parent drops the food and the teenagers scramble for it. 6 seconds later, up they come, demanding more. The parent drops more and flees the nest. The cameras have provided us with multiple curiosities needing further study. One for me is, do herons eat bugs? They certainly look like they do, but we've yet to catch the bug on camera. We'll see adults and young appear to be peering intently at something near the nest, like this one is. Then suddenly thrusting their head forward, grabbing it, whatever it is. Here are 1-month-olds similarly peering and going after something of great interest. Bugs? Maybe. Here's a near fledgling poking around a nest that's been empty for 10 days. What's it after? Maybe this season will solve that mystery. Heron chicks get to their feet by 2 weeks of age. Here's the 8-day-old we watched feeding earlier, learning to stand erect. We last saw it tipped forward, fish in beak. Fish finished, its wings are up, helping it balance. 4 seconds later, it's erect. Still wobbly, it tips forward again, now once again erect. By 3 weeks of age, heron young walk steadily. Here's a 3.5-week-old checking things out, walking so steadily it's venturing right off the nest. But not for long. 2 seconds later, a parent has blocked further adventuring. By 4 weeks of age, heron young begin to flap their wings. Here's one giving it a try. Faster and faster. By 7 weeks, they are really cruising along, making short hops to nearby branches. In another 2 weeks, they'll be gone. The nesting season last year was very long, lasting from March 4th to September 11th. The length was attributable to some herons laying second clutches after losing their first young. This photo demonstrates that clearly. The adult heron on the right is tending its second clutch of eggs adjacent to a nest on which a maturing heron, almost ready to fledge, is standing. Some herons successfully raised their second clutch, others failed with both. Here's a pair the day after a second failed attempt to rear young. I can't help but wonder, looking at the dejected postures of these two, if herons, like humans, experience depression. Raising young herons isn't easy. Parents and their young face multiple threats on their path to fledging. Bald eagles are one of the greatest threats to herons successfully rearing young. They eat heron eggs, heron chicks, and occasionally an adult heron. March Point Heronry has a resident pair of bald eagles who unsuccessfully attempted to raise young this past year. Sue Ayler took this remarkable photo of a bald eagle's view into the heronry. Though we could hear bald eagle calls and chat while watching the cameras and hear the uproar of distressed herons, we never witnessed an eagle in the act of predation. However, we were able to watch adult herons defending their young. Shirley Ho captured this remarkable sequence of a parent protecting its young as an eagle cry was heard over the camera audio. Neck feathers erect, wings spread, protectively covering the chick. A half a minute later, the chick looks out from behind. Wings spread, neck and head feathers erect, as are its parents. 3 minutes later, the adult is settling down, its head and neck feathers relaxing, the chick back under the parent's protective wings, still peering out, top knot erect. Here's another photo taken by Sue Ayler of the resident bald eagles this past year. It clearly shows the eaglet's head above the nest rim. We don't know why their attempt to raise young failed this past year, but this was the last day the eaglet was seen in the nest. 12 days later, Stacy Dahl saw this: herons on the eagle nest stealing sticks. One of the stranger things the camera revealed about life in the heronry. You take my chicks, I'll steal your sticks. Heron young need protection from the elements as well as from predators. Weather can be a significant threat to successfully raising young. Here's a brooder keeping her hatchlings warm in a downpour. And here you can see an adult moving from one side of its young to the other, attempting to give them some protection from a deluge. Here's that same nest 50 minutes later, all still wet, finishing up a feeding, finding the last tidbits on the bottom of the nest. 6 minutes later, One chick on the left with eyes closed as if asleep, the other two waiting for more food. The littlest in the front, definitely still hungry, stares at its older resting sibling, opens its beak, and grabs hold of its sibling's bill while the parent preens and the other sib turns its back. But no food there. In case you're like me and worry about these little ones, they do make it through the night. Here they are the next morning. All grow into strong fledglings, even though their size differences are dramatic at this age. Clearly, the littlest hatched last. They're the three that destroyed the nest I showed you earlier. Heat also stresses herons. Herons cool off by opening their mouths and fluttering their throats, and by opening and drooping their wings. Here are two very hot adolescents fluttering their throats. They're so hot, their top knots look wilted. This adult pair is working together to shade their young. The one in front opening and drooping its wings, the one behind with a throat flutter. Here they are, simply shading the young with their bodies. And here's my favorite, a 25-day-old trying to keep cool with open, drooped wings and throat fluttering. Wind can wreak havoc at March Point. Here's a brooder hunkered down just after a gust lifted up its feathers. Wind can blow nests down. In 2017, a windstorm with gusts up to 50 miles per hour struck the March Point Heronry. 2 days later, Jim Shelton's found 2 large maple trees down, multiple nests on the ground, 25 dead chicks, and some live ones. Look in the center of the photo on the right, and you can see one of the live ones peeking out through the leaves. 6 of the chicks were captured and taken to Wolf Hollow Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. One of the chicks survived. Here, in this photo taken by Sue Ayler, you see it on the day it was released, heading back to the wild. Heron young are also threatened by sibling aggression. If knocked from the nest to the forest floor, the young are unable to fly, and the adults don't feed them on the ground. They will die either from starvation or be killed by ground predators. Here are 2 siblings about to begin bill dueling. Both survived and successfully fledged. Fledging takes place over several weeks as chicks from eggs that hatched early in the season leave the heronry before those that hatched from second clutches. Here's the last fledgling visible on the north camera the day it left the heronry, September 7th. Once the March Point herons leave the heronry at the end of the nesting season, they don't return until the following spring. Though the heronry is empty, they're still around. The March Point herons are year-round residents of Skagit County, just not of the heronry, which is why we see them around here all winter, standing patiently in the fields, hunting voles, huddling together on the uplands, or warming their feet or foot on the refinery pipeline. That's it. I hope you enjoyed as much as I do spending time with March Point's very special great blue herons.